Being a new dad, I thought that it would be interesting to make a video telling you guys of my firsthand experience because there's a lot of things that life doesn't really prepare you for, and being a parent is one where there's a lot of information out there, but it's something that you can't know until you experience it. I did think about making a video like this once Leon was a year old, but honestly, the life and experiences that I'm having are constantly in flux and changing. And by the time he's a year old, my feelings that I have right now might be completely different. So I wanted to end up having a video talking about the first few months of having a baby, now that he's kind of getting a bit more actuated. First of all, this is also quite obviously the perspective of me, the man. I'm not the one who had to give birth. And I think that was probably the most traumatic part of the entire experience, was having to watch my wife, the person that I love, my partner, go through all of this crazy pain and turbulations to have the baby born. I could only really just sit there and be a support figure. And even so, I couldn't make things better. I could just be there for her. The birthing process will vary from person to person, but in our case, it was 30 hours of labor, which ultimately concluded with a C-section. Speaking only from my experience with my wife and nothing to do with the baby yet, this meant that she had a long road to recovery, which meant that I had to take a lot more responsibility. Not that she couldn't help with the baby by any means, but I had to take care of the dogs, take all the garbage, and things that might normally have a balance between us. I had to do pretty much everything. And I'm not saying this in any sort of a negative way. I, of course, take it as my responsibility as the man to just be there and be the support. I'm not saying this in a negative sense. It's more so just, oh, here's what happens if your wife gets a C-section. Now, as far as baby and the experience of baby, there's a lot of things that happen with it. One thing that we picked up right away from the nurses is how roughly they would handle him. It's not that they handle the baby rough, it's just they very quickly made us realize, oh, the baby's not a fragile piece of glass. It's not going to shatter in our hands. Like when they're burping him, they would be patting on his back and stuff like that, which I just know from the experiences that I've heard from some friends that were new parents. You kind of treat the baby like, oh, it's so precious and, oh, be very careful. But the reality is that it's a human being and it's gonna be fine. This isn't an excuse to throw the baby like a football or anything. It was more so to take the positive notion of he'll be fine. Now, we did have a little bit of a scare with him because of two things. One is because he was in labor with my wife for the 30 hours, he was sitting inside her at a very specific position, which meant that his head was kind of like a gigantic cone head. Now, baby skulls adjusting is a perfectly normal thing that we knew about, so we weren't too worried, but his head was very, very sensitive for the first few days. We did, in fact, have to be very careful with him supporting his neck more so than holding his head, because anytime we would touch his head, he would start crying. That's also kind of an obvious thing that a lot of people might not understand, is the baby's neck is not very strong and the head is too heavy, so that's why you have to support a baby's neck more so than the head. The other thing that kind of happened is as he was born, they had this clamp that they put onto his belly button. This is pretty normal for a baby. Basically, the umbilical cord gets cut, they put the clamp on, and you're supposed to just leave that on until, I don't know, until it heals. That, or it's supposed to naturally fall off. That part was really frustrating to me because the clamp is huge. It's as big as my finger on this little baby, and as you're changing diapers and stuff, it's shifting and turning around. And ultimately, it ended up ripping off. As you can guess, it's pretty scary to have a newborn baby that is bleeding profusely from the belly button. And on top of that, the nurse that was there during that ordeal wasn't very good. I mean, obviously, she mentioned how she never dealt with anything like that before, but it was just very apparent that she didn't know what to do. It wasn't that big of a deal though. We just ended up having to block it with some sort of gauze until eventually it stopped bleeding, and then he was fine. All the while inside the hospital, it kind of sucks as the man. The wife gets a really fancy, nice bed for recovery. I'm stuck on a cot. On top of that, the baby has to be fed pretty much every 2 to 3 hours. And since it's such a new experience for both of you, you're more than likely both going to be there for the feeding session, which means that neither of you is getting any sleep. That's something people always tell you, oh man, you're never gonna get any sleep, or you don't know tired until you're a parent, which is half true. These people are kind of like whiny, I think. Like, sure, if you're the type of person who's never stayed up late before, then yeah, you're gonna be like super exhausted. And I'm not by any means saying that I'm not completely sleep deprived. But in my instance, you know, I've stayed up all night. I stayed up for 46 hours when we went to our trip to Mexico. So I have some perspective and I know I'm gonna be fine regardless of how much sleep I get. Still, you're only going to be getting like 2 to 3 hour sleeps or naps between baby feeds. And the one thing that I learned very quickly was how much an hour of sleep can make all the difference for sleep deprivation. I think we were in the hospital for like 6 or 7 days or something. And then after a while, we were just like, okay, we gotta go home. This sucks. Because getting home means that we could finally start getting into our own routine. Speaking of routine, that's another thing that parents often say doesn't happen with a baby. Oh, you don't have a routine anymore. But no, that's not true. You have a routine, but the routine revolves around baby's routine. And I think the biggest learning curve of any parent is figuring out what exactly our baby's needs. In most cases, it's actually quite simple. It's either a diaper change, food, or cranky because of lack of sleep. Once the wife and I kind of actuated to being at home, we kind of came to the realization that we should trade off during his feed times. This way, I would feed him in 3 hours, and then I would feed him again in an additional 3 hours, meaning that the wife would be able to get 6 hours sleep and vice versa. Something that we did struggle with early on was the wife wasn't really producing enough milk to keep up with his feeding. So we had to use a lot of formula, which there's nothing wrong with formula. People try to act like it's the devil, but generally speaking, if you balance formula with milk, the baby will be fine. Milk obviously is the best option for it because it's like the most natural thing and has like a whole crap ton of vitamins that the formula just doesn't give. But as the wife just kept pumping and pumping and pumping, eventually she ended up making enough milk that he's fine now. We barely use any formula anymore, which does come with a very, very small trade-off because the formula had iron in it, and regardless of formula or milk, the baby does have to get some vitamin D, which is usually just like 1 tiny drop a day. So I'm actually adding this in later because oddly enough, I didn't think to talk about it, which is breast versus bottle. From talking to healthcare professionals, it doesn't seem to make a difference. There's people that have their own weird personal preferences around it. Like if you want to breastfeed, okay, be my guest. But in the case of the wife and I, we basically feed Leon 100% with the bottle now, just because it's so much more convenient. We are constantly having to clean the bottles, of course, but generally speaking, the wife just pumps all of her milk, puts it in the bottles, and then we happen to have enough for him over the night, over the day, whatever. The reason why the bottle is so much more convenient for us is because it means that I can pretty much feed him anytime now. Some parents would prefer to just do 100% breastfeeding, and that's their prerogative. They can do whatever they want, but it does mean that the wife is not going to be sleeping much. Now, the thing is with the baby feeds, the baby would actually sleep for longer than the 2 to 3 hour session. At least in our case, it doesn't happen all the time. But the problem is that you have to wake the baby every 3 hours for feed. That's why you end up becoming so sleep deprived, especially during those first days in the hospital. If I had to describe being a parent, I'd say it's just another job where you're on call. You're not working 24/7 like some people would have you believe, but the baby does eat up a lot of time. Now, I don't know if this next part has anything to do with me being a man, because we read and heard about all of this stuff about people saying that, you know, when the baby's born, you don't necessarily fall in love with it immediately. It can take a while for the parental instincts to kick in, which I think kind of happened with me. Like, obviously, I love baby, he's cute and adorable, but part of me just sees it as work. It almost feels like just getting a new puppy and having to raise it and, you know, take care of its needs, at least until it's actuated and understands what's going on. I think the biggest adjustment period for myself anyways was being self-employed and also being a workaholic. I had to get used to the fact that I can't work under the conditions that I normally would. This is why you guys have seen me take a shift away from the live streams or like making videos and stuff, and things just have generally slowed down a lot because I gotta take care of him for the majority of my day. This won't affect most people because, again, it's because I'm self-employed. But something that happened with me that might end up helping other people who are self-employed is I kind of started to feel bad that I wasn't working, and that became frustration that I would direct towards baby. I wasn't like mean or abusive towards baby, of course not. but it was just a form of negative emotions that I was associating with taking care of him, which ultimately made me more frustrated than I needed to be. Since then, I took some time to acclimate and get used to the idea that baby comes first, and I need to just think of the work as a job that comes second, which is tough for me considering that I've been doing YouTube full-time for many years. Obviously, in most cases, most parents won't have to deal with this conundrum because they're just working 9 to 5, which can be very frustrating because they want you to come back to work very quickly. This, of course, is me speaking from experience with my cousin who ended up getting his child more recently. And I think like within a week of the baby being born, they wanted him to go back to work already. Having that experience so fresh in my mind, I just thought that's ridiculous. You are in no condition to get back to work within a week of a new baby. And if anything, having a child has made me respect single parents even more. There is just no way that I would possibly be able to raise this baby alone. That would be insane. Like, you always hear these heroic stories of single parents that work and take care of their kid at the same time. Genuinely, oh my God. Like, they must have an incredible supportive family or something, because I just, I'm flabbergasted. But okay, let's fast forward a bit, because the only real next big experience was when he ended up having his immunization shots at 2 months. So once the baby turned 2 months old, it was time for him to go get his shots, which are pretty brutal. It's like a really long needle that has to get jammed like halfway through his leg. It was pretty traumatic for us, and of course he didn't like it, but thankfully it kind of worked out around the same time as his feeding. So he had a full tummy, he had a clean diaper, and afterwards he was already smiling. But that is an entirely subjective scenario because every baby is different, regardless of what parents will try to advise you. We seemingly have gotten very lucky with him, where he's very active, he's very happy, and he's laughing. He's also got a pretty steady routine of sleeping, of which he's sleeping on me right now. He was squirming a bit earlier before when we were starting the recording of this video, but yeah, now he's just sleeping on me. That is not necessarily normal, but there's nothing wrong with it either, because there is no normal. This is where I wanted to get into the last topic in this video, which is the people that will try to give you unsolicited advice on raising your kid. I get it, you were a parent once, and you're excited to share the knowledge and experiences that you had with other people. But in all honesty, and I say this with love, f off. Your baby is completely different from mine, and a lot of the advice that you give does not matter. The only way that you can really help someone is to kind of give them a bit of a heads up and a warning as to the experiences that they'll end up having. The idea that you and your partner should take turns feeding the baby so each of you can get more sleep, that's a great piece of advice. You should also write everything down because you're going to forget very quickly. As stupid as it might seem, you will be sleep deprived. Even if you don't physically feel tired, you will notice a lack of focus, or rather a lack of being able to focus on multiple projects. I'm still really good at just looking straight ahead and doing one thing, but I can barely think of other things at the same time now. This is where dad brain or parent brain comes into action. You just get used to being sleep deprived, but it's in no way like the death sentence that some people act like it is. Case in point, today, I'm probably gonna be up till like 5 or 6 in the morning, and I have to wake up at 9 in the morning because the wife's gonna go to work. I'm not gonna get that much sleep, but what else is new? Who cares? Lack of sleep isn't gonna kill you. Another thing that you'll hear from people is, oh, the experience goes by so fast, you should cherish it. Shut up. This is just me talking, but I don't care about that hippy dippy shit. I live in the moment, man. I'm enjoying every single day with him as he gets older, and I'm not gonna look back at this and go, oh God, I miss it. But that's something that applies to like my entire life. I don't look back at things and think with regret. As for whether or not the experience of being a parent is rewarding, yes and no. Like when he laughs and when he's having fun and starting to kind of get more of a personality, that I think to me is going to be the part that's going to be really fun. Dad's time to shine comes out when the baby's old enough that I can start playing with him. Not to imply that I dislike any of this, it's just another experience to have. But to me, I think it's going to be worth it more so in the long haul, which is what you sign up for when you become a parent. Now, one last thing that people don't tell you, and oftentimes will try to avoid because people consider negativity to be toxic, because you're sleep deprived, you and your partner will fight. It's inevitable. I'm not going to act like me and Mariko haven't had our fights over the years, But a lot of it is very constructive, and a lot of it isn't, because I've got my baggage of shit left over from my parents. This is nothing new, and not really anything that you need to worry about. So long as you're self-aware enough to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, I gotta work on these things, then there is no excuse not to start doing that right now with everything in your life, let alone having a baby. But some stuff that you kind of come to realize firsthand is when you have a baby, just how you act in that situation can be very different. Like in my case, I found him whining and going crazy and stuff to be quite frustrating. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's an instinctual thing or just a super high level of stress when he starts crying, but I literally get like shaky hands and nervous. And upon having a conversation with my parents, I found out that that's how my dad acted when I was a baby, which is absolutely insane to me to think that the only reason I feel that way is because I took that on from my dad when I was such a stupid small baby that I wasn't even conscious of life. Point being is it's never too soon to start adjusting who you are for the sake of baby. Because your baby's brain is a sponge and they are going to emulate everything that you do, for better or worse. But at the same time, I don't think that it's justified to stress out about being a perfect parent, because there's no such thing. Just take care of them, give them plenty of love, give them all your money, and teach them proper values. Okay, maybe not give them all your money, but kids are expensive. That's the point I'm getting at. Which is another thing that parents don't teach you, is just how ridiculously overpriced all baby memorabilia is. Diapers and baby food, and even our garbage can for the diapers is all ridiculously expensive and manipulative. These companies are legally getting away with scamming you. Like just the other day, we saw that the garbage bags that we get for Leon's diapers, which get filled up very quickly, state that they can hold like 6 months worth of a newborn baby's diaper. Babies change their diapers on a monthly basis and get bigger and bigger with every month. You will not be using newborn diapers for 6 months. Anyways, this video is long enough. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. I hope in some way, shape, or form this ended up helping somebody, because that's kind of the goal with this video. I will chime in again as he gets older. Maybe we'll do it at a year, maybe we'll do it at 6 or 8 months. I don't know. It depends when he evolves into his next form.